You're listening to the LA Football Podcast.
Hey, Los Angeles, welcome back to the LA Football Show here on the LA Football Network, live on the Mightier 1090 ESPN Radio. I'm your co-host, Ryan Dyer, joined as always by the madman, Jamal Badney. Back from the break on radio, we are now talking UCLA, ready to talk Bruins and get into a really fun event that Jamal was able to attend, featuring the past 20 UCLA Bruins quarterbacks. He's got some great stories. Met a bunch of them. As the quarterback club for Mattel Children's Hospital was the event, so we'll let Jamal kind of talk on that. Show is always brought to you by our friends at BetOnline. Head to betonline.ag today. Use our promo code BELIEVE. That's BLEAV. Gets you a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Tell them the guys at the LA Football Network sent you. So, Jamal, first of all, how are you? Welcome back from the break on radio, but on podcast. Those that haven't heard you yet, Bruins fans, what's good? What's going on?
All well, Rye. Always excited to talk about my Bruins. You know, I talk about my Bruins. I'm always reminded of my dentist, you know, whenever the Bruins segment comes on, because, you know, I had to go to the dentist last year. You know, I needed to do kind of a deep cleaning. And, you know, I've always had sort of a challenge with my teeth historically. I had to have 8 teeth pulled out in my childhood because, you know, my permanent teeth were coming too quickly, and my baby teeth hadn't fallen out yet. And just, it's always a thing. I had headgear, not just braces, but headgear. I mean, it was a disaster. My teeth have been an unmitigated disaster my whole life. And so I go to the dentist, and she's like, you know, this is going to be a long journey here with this deep cleaning. And, you know, I sort of reclined back on my chair. And, you know, it was one of those places that, you know, they got the TV on the ceiling, right? And so she's like, well, what are you going to – it's fancy. You know, what are you going to – what do you want to watch? You know, is it okay if I put on ESPN or if I put on a sports radio show? I said, honestly, if you could set me on fire and I could watch ESPN. So there's nothing you could do to me and not put something of sports on. I could watch sports literally with my hair on fire. You could do anything that you want. And that's how I feel about the Bruins. You know, I could be in any sort of pain, in unimaginable. You want to talk Bruins? I'm ready. You know, I could talk about the Bruins through a broken leg, you know, so always excited to talk about my Bruins.
Well, there you go. It's funny, we're at the dentist. I had 7 teeth pulled as a kid.
Whoa.
I had a spacer. I had headgear as well.
Wow.
So yes, no
we're
cavities. Never had a cavity. But I have not been to the dentist in probably 12 years.
Wow.
So something tells me I may have a cavity or two just hanging out that I probably need to go get checked out because it's been so long. But it's one of those where I don't know if you felt this or anyone else felt this, but I almost feel embarrassed to go now because it's been so long. Yeah. I'm like, no human being should have to deal with what's going on.
I hadn't gone to the dentist in 3 years, and it was the most embarrassing, sheepish thing imaginable, you know, and it was unreal. I had to sort of lie about the reasons that I wasn't, you know, there. I was like, well, you know, I was so busy and this thing happened. I mean, I was making up, you know, dead relatives, frankly, you know, and saying, well, you know, I had to go here and there and blah, blah, blah. So, yeah, no, I totally feel it. And we are kindred spirits here, Ryan, because even I have never had a cavity. So, you know, that's amazing.
So our teeth were a mess, but not a dirty mess, I guess, or not a cavity-filled mess. But yeah, I always not always. I haven't been in forever. But what I would say is I'll use the excuse of not having dental insurance or something. I was like, couldn't afford dental insurance. So I'll use that somehow. But anyway.
That'll alleviate kind of the judgment and the tension.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's a great answer. Actually.
Times are tough, you know. Like,
yeah, I mean,
and a lot of
fictitious relatives and killing them, you know. So it's that's not a good answer. Yeah,
I mean, especially when the response is like, "Oh, I'm sorry, but I don't think they died for 3 years straight." Like, there's probably a week of mourning, and then you can go get your teeth cleaned. So, anyway, moving to happy thoughts. So, first of all, just tell us about this event that you got to attend. I mean, you got pictures with Troy Aikman. You got to hang out and sit at the same table with our good buddy Corey Paz. Obviously, all the other legends that were there. So I just can't wait to hear. We tried to do this on our live show on Monday, and Wi-Fi issues unfortunately cut us off from hearing some of those. So now we can really get into it. So just tell us, first of all, what the event was, why you were there, and then we can get into some stories.
Yeah, Ryan. I mean, it just really what an honor and a privilege it was to be there. This was the first ever UCLA quarterback club event that was the brainchild really of one Patrick Cowan, who obviously is a great UCLA quarterback. He was the starting quarterback of the famed 13-9 upset over number 2 USC. And so he had this terrific idea for the quarterbacks to come together and kind of build out a quarterback club, much in the way a lot of other universities have. And then he said, well, if we're all coming together, let's do this kind of on a regular basis and do it for a noble cause. And so this is going to be the first in a series of quarterback club events that will happen every 2 years, where all of the quarterbacks come together and all of the proceeds from the dinner invitation to the silent auction to everything that was going on, all of those proceeds went to Mattel Children's Hospital. So it was just an incredible event to be at. And I just got an opportunity, like you mentioned, to see one of my childhood idols, Troy Aikman, hang out with our buddy Corey Paws, one of my other childhood favorites, Cade McNown. I mean, I fell in love with UCLA off of that 97-98 team with the 20 wins in a row. And I was a lefty and Cade McNown was a lefty. I told him, I said, Cade, I would go into the backyard and pretend to be you. Literally, I'd have a UCLA 18 jersey and be throwing the ball to myself and pretending that, I was winning 20 games in a row, and got a chance to see the great Gary Beeben, UCLA's lone Heisman Trophy winner. And what an honor and a privilege it was to see him. And just a wide range of UCLA quarterbacks. Our good friend Wayne Cook, who's been doing a great job on the LA Football Network recently. Got a chance to meet him and his beautiful wife and share kind of some LAFB stories as well. And Wayne was, of course, the quarterback of the 93 team that went to the Rose Bowl against Wisconsin. And I remember that being my first ever college football game, was that Wisconsin-UCLA 93 wow. Rose Bowl. So it was just, I sort of go back into my childhood and come back out and talk to these guys and all for such a great cause.
Yeah, amazing. It's amazing when players of stature, and just players in general, but when they will come together and actually kind of use their fame, their worth, whatever you want to call it, and do good. And, so many of these guys do on their own, but it's cool seeing them all come together and do it in that way. So were some of the recent quarterbacks there, Josh Rosen and some of those guys, or was it more the more tenured guys?
Yeah, no, I mean, it was recent up until the only two kind of, the omissions that you felt were Brett Hundley and Josh Rosen. Brett Hundley, because he had a game that day in the XFL. And so
that's right.
It was hard for him to go directly from Houston to LA and make the timing work. But he sort of wanted to reiterate. And there was a note from him of saying, I wish I was there. The logistics couldn't work. I mean, even if my game was a few hours earlier, I wanted to be there. And Brett Hundley gave, very generously donated to the evening as one of the primary sponsors, and really meant a lot to him. And Josh Rosen was kind of in a similar boat there, where, there were a couple things going on with his preparation and what have you that just didn't make it happen. But it was really what a thrill and an honor. And I can't wait to go back again with my, it's something me and my dad will always sort of cherish. My dad, being the sentimental collector that he was, he won the silent auction for you
didn't tell me that. Let's go.
Yeah, a helmet where all 22 guys signed the helmet. So,
wow.
So they sort of announced my dad's name at the end of the evening with a couple of the other silent auction winners.
Dr. Madney.
So we're trying to figure out where to put it in my parents' house right now. And so, that's going to be really fun. So just a great father-son moment, Ryan. And I think one of really the highlight of the night, if you will, was the panel discussion at the end after, you mingle and you have dinner and you sort of hop around. And it was a panel discussion with just Troy Aikman and Gary Beeben, and just kind of getting their thoughts about life and success and failure and Bruin values and NIL and the BIG and UCLA's place in athletics and academics was really, really special.
That's awesome. So before I ask you about that, and I don't want this to sound wrong, obviously I kind of know, but just so the listeners know, so how were you and your dad able to go to this event? I mean, I know how involved y'all with UCLA, but if anyone listening, like, oh, do you like buy tickets? Do you get invited? So how are you able to go to this? For those who don't know.
Yeah, no, right. I mean, we're just, a very proud Bruins, both of us, we sort of introduce ourselves as the double Bruins, because both of us are double Bruins in terms of, for me, for grad school, and for him, with undergrad and grad school. And so he's been president of the Engineering Alumni Association for a number of years. He's been a very, very active alum. And now it serves as a distinguished faculty member in the School of Engineering, and so very involved with the school in terms of kind of strategic initiatives. And I have the great privilege and honor of being a board director on the UCLA Foundation, which is entrusted of looking at UCLA's endowment and their allocations to their academic programs, and how they make partnerships, public-private partnerships with the city and with the state, and how UCLA can continue to thrive as the world's greatest public institution, and continue that mission of access and equity and diversity of higher education.
That's awesome, man. Well-deserved, and great you got to go something like that. So before we get into kind of the panel discussions, I definitely want to hear like Aikman's thoughts on UCLA going to the Big Ten, and his thoughts on NIL and some of those things that obviously he didn't get to experience none of these guys did as players. But any casual, just like when you're meeting guys, mingling stories. I know you have some great pictures with all the guys, and you were able to talk to Troy like one-on-one for a little while, Troy being Aikman. So any just of those stories they're fun sharing? I know you were able to rep LAFB pretty great, which obviously helps us out. But before we get to the panel discussion, just any fun little nuanced stories.
A couple of really fun stories. I had an opportunity to kind of go up to Troy and tell him, he was the reason that I was a Dallas Cowboys fan in my youth, because it was all about him. And, he turned around and he's like, I love to hear that, and just sort of really enjoyed it. And we had a chance to kind of share a little bit about LAFB. And then Wayne Cook, I sort of introduced myself as co-owner of LAFB, and he was like, oh my God, I got to go get my wife. And he brings his wife over to say, this is one of the guys of LAFB, the thing I've been doing, the last couple of weeks. And it was sort of flipped. I was like, Wayne, I'm supposed to be bringing people to come to, introduce you. It's not supposed to be the other way around here, so that was really fun. And then got a chance to, go up to Corey Paz, who, 2 years ago, Ryan, obviously, he's a good friend of ours, and we got to hang out for the USC-UCLA tailgate. And he promised my dad an autographed jersey of his from his Ohio State game back in 2001, because I told him my dad was a fan, and he said, I only have 7 fans in the world, and the fact that I met one of them, I'm going to give him an autographed jersey. And that autographed jersey never came. And so I went up to Corey and I was like, where the heck is my autographed jersey, man? And so that was a great sort of icebreaker that led to just, things that I cannot even share, in terms of some of his jokes and stories. So really, it's a great time.
Corey is, I can't believe we haven't had him back on the show. We'll have him back. He's the best. He's hilarious. And I love that you said your dad and him just like hit it off, right? They were just having a ball together.
Oh, yeah. Had a ball. And he joked. He was like, my dad was like, you got to come over to our house and have Indian food. And Corey turns around and says, you have no idea what a huge honor that is, because I have an Indian neighbor and I know how hard it is to sort of break through like an Indian community when you're not Indian, And so he's like, when I first got invited from my neighbor, it was like I won the Super Bowl. It was unbelievable. And, and Corey was like, he doesn't invite me to everything, but he invites me enough, and it's always an honor. So the fact that you're inviting me over to dinner, I'm ready to, sort of have the champagne spray here of us winning the title. So that was a big laugh.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah. Corey's the best. For those that don't know, Corey Paz, we've had him on before. We, go back in the archives. We'll definitely have him on again. And he's at every UCLA game. He's got a suite at the Rose Bowl. You can find him out in the parking lot tailgating every time. He's super friendly. So he's a guy that if you see, just go up and say what up. And he's like the nicest, most hilarious, unfiltered guy you'll ever meet. He'll say whatever's on his mind, and like it or love it, he's going to say it, which makes it fun. So, but no, it's awesome. I think it's so fun when you can meet these athletes, and not even talking UCLA, just any athlete at all, because you realize they're human beings just like the rest of us.
Absolutely.
And it's also nice that, yes, you were in a still a sports setting, but it was a setting where it wasn't like a media. Obviously, I'm sure there was some media there covering it, but it wasn't like this huge media thing. So guys can kind of let their guard down and just be like themselves. And it's so fun when you're able to do that. And when you see, like, me and you both have had the great pleasure and honor of meeting so many athletes, people in media by doing this. And when you can truly like get their guard down, it's like, okay, it's so refreshing just to like hear their stories and hear them talk just like we do. I mean, we're over here just shooting the ass talking football, and they want to do the same thing. And so it's super cool that you're able to do that. So, but more on the formality side, let's start with BIG, the Big Ten. Obviously UCLA playing their last year in the Pac-12. So I don't know if you talked to Troy Aikman about that at all on the side, or if it was just within the panel, but what were his overall thoughts? I'm sure he's done a show about it somewhere, but I can't recollect the time he's really talked about UCLA specifically making the move. So I'd love to hear what his thoughts were on them moving over.
Yeah, Ryan. I mean, it was part of the panel discussion, and it was a question that was posed to both Troy as well as Gary Beeben. And I must say they were very aligned in their answers for both BIG as well as NIL. And I'll just start with the BIG. And both of them said that they love the tradition of the Pac-12, Pac-10, Pac-8. In Gary Beeben's case, it was Pac-8. In Troy's case, it was Pac-10. Obviously, it's Pac-12 now. And how much those conference games meant to them, particularly the games against Cal and Stanford, in addition to, of course, USC. And Troy actually opened up in a very deep way and said, the one I don't want to call stain or scar, or just the one blemish that I feel about my UCLA experience, because it changed my life in immeasurable ways. And he talked about his relationship with Coach Terry Donahue, rest in peace, and what that meant to him as a man, and the lessons that he still takes with him today. He said, the one thing that still pains me is I could never beat USC. And that was just such a touching moment in the way he described it. And so you could tell how much both of these guys are traditionalists and purists, but they both unanimously said, we understand it and we agree with it. And they understood where kind of the future of the game is going. And I think they were very excited about UCLA getting the opportunity to play in a preeminent conference. And they mentioned obviously the likes of Michigan and Ohio State and Michigan State and Wisconsin and so forth, but also the opportunity of how that's going to really open up the recruiting pipeline for UCLA and what it can really mean to take UCLA football to the next level. So I thought it was this beautiful, delicate balance of genuinely acknowledging the history and the tradition, but being so forward thinking in sort of unanimously agreeing of saying, we love tradition, but we understand what needs to happen. And in order to kind of stay at the front of innovation, they had to do this. And we completely agree with it and support it.
Yeah. I mean, it seems like almost, and I haven't talked to obviously every fan but everyone, specifically player and media wise, almost everyone's exactly in that same fold. And we've been that since it was announced last July or whatever it was, coming up on almost a year now, which is crazy. But that's immediately what we thought was, oh man, there's definitely some sadness there, but excitement for like what this was going to do for the program for the next 10 to 20 years. So good to hear there on the line. This was a UCLA event, so obviously they're probably being fairly politically correct in what they said, but hey, I think that's truly probably how they felt as well. So, but about NIL, what were their thoughts on NIL? Because that's one that these guys didn't get to experience, and now it's changed in the game as well.
Yeah, it was really interesting, Ryan. And the one thing I'll say is it really didn't feel like any of those answers were prescriptive or rehearsed in any way. Like there was just such a genuineness to who they were, both of them, and such vulnerability. It made you so proud to be a Bruin, to be affiliated with the university, and to sort of share in the values of true Bruin values. So they were both so compelling in that way. With regards to NIL, it was very interesting. They both had the same point of view on NIL, but for different reasons. And Troy came out and said, de facto, he didn't like it. He doesn't like NIL. And one of the reasons he said is because one of the great challenges that a lot of quarterbacks have to overcome that isn't really talked about a lot in the NFL is how do you win over a locker room when you're the highest paid guy by far? Mm-hmm. And that's a very hard thing to do. And it's actually one of the primary reasons sometimes when guys don't pan out. And when people talk about being a bust and, he had all the measurables, but he didn't have kind of that leadership gene or what you're really talking about there is that relatability and that empathy and being a leader of understanding that, hey, I'm the highest paid, but like, we're all in this together and my success is completely predicated on your success. And he said, when you're in college and you're all poor and you're all, just students and you're all kind of scrapping together, you learn to build those bonds. He had this incredible example, Ryan, that Troy Aikman was actually the number one typist in the entire Oklahoma County of where he was, because his mom was actually a writer for the newspaper. And so he sort of inherited that gene, and he talked about how he would trade skills with his teammates. Like he would type their essays, obviously they did the work. I want to be clear that he would do the typing in exchange for them doing his laundry or them, getting him a couple of lunches and just those things that build those bonds. And he talks so much about how those relationships have stood the test of time and how close he is to so many of those guys. And that is going to be a skill that's going to be lost. When you have the quarterback now today and NIL making $500,000, $1 million, $3 million, $5 million, and you've got the linemen making 40 and 20K, how do you build that leadership? How do you build that skill that you're going to need at the next level? And I thought that was a supremely profound point. And with Beeben, Ryan, he also didn't like NIL, and he praised it as because being in a similar situation allows you to be creative. And he was obviously in the 60s in a different time. And he talked about how in his day, the scholarship didn't even include books. It only included tuition and, room and board, but it didn't include books. And so all of the different sort of odd jobs that he had to do to sort of earn enough money to pay for his books that then actually translated so successfully for him in the business world when he went into real estate and really is an incredibly successful man in Southern California. He said all of that creativity, because necessity is the mother of invention and innovation. And when you take those constraints away, you lose that creativity. And so it just was so profound how they kind of came at it, but they both were in agreement that it really wasn't, NIL is not a good thing for the game moving forward.
Interesting. Yeah. And great points and very intuitive and stuff. So we're out of time, but I'm curious, did they talk at all about the transfer portal? Were they asked that at all?
They were not. They were not asked about it.
I'd be really curious because that's a lot of another hot topic, especially among former players about the transfer portal. But yeah, anyway, sounds like an amazing event. We are out of time on radio, so we're going to take a quick break, but super pumped, man. You got to go to that and love to hear more stories. And hopefully Bruins fans out there listening enjoyed some of that, and check out the pictures. Jamal's got them up on Twitter. And we'll have plenty more. Like I said, if you're running the Corey Paz out at the Rose Bowl, make sure to go say what up, because he'll chat your ear off and we'll appreciate you saying hi. So taking a quick break. We'll be back at the top of hour for more LA football talk.
You're listening to the LA Football Podcast.